Greetings and welcome to the first ever episode of Penniless Predictions. On today's show, the Boomsday project release. What decks will be prevalent in the standard meta? What decks will not succeed? We do not know, but I am prepared to predict. First, a small disclaimer. I have never done this before. This will be my first official attempt to predict the meta, and I am very nervous about it. I don't expect to be right, and anticipate a lot of my predictions will be very off the mark. Over 100 cards will be entering the game, and with them come thousands of interactions and tactics, and once the smoke clears, only a half dozen top tier decks will emerge. I'd be amazed if I could predict even one of those decks. With that in mind, here are my tactics for this video. For each class, I will give predictions for decks I think will work, and decks I think will not, while drawing attention to one particular deck I think will be the best. Then, I'll predict how good the class will do in the meta, guessing either the top 3, the bottom 3, or the middle 3. I, again, don't expect to be accurate with this prediction either, but I'm willing to attempt my best analysis. For tackling these classes, I will proceed in alphabetical order, which means we'll be starting with... Excellent! Starting with the class everyone on Reddit hates. This'll be fun. Druid. Everyone in the Hearthstone community won't shut up about how powerful Druid's new cards are. These cards fit in for seemingly 3 variants of Druid: Combo, Big, and Tree Ants. Of these methodologies, which will prevail? In my opinion, it's no question. A token Druid using Tree Ants is clearly the strongest and most intimidating archetype. Perhaps I'm biased since Token Druid was my deck of choice for the last month, but this deck gets strong pieces in regards to Living Mana working with the Glorious Gloop, Arcane Tyrant, and Mulch Muncher. Dendrologists can likewise have the chance to pull you a second Glorious Gloop and keep your hand size healthy for Whispering Woods. These combinations, plus Spreading Plague countering aggro and Ultimate Infestation stop and control, makes me believe that this will be the king of the Druids. Malygos and Big Druid, conversely, have a lot of weaknesses. Flabidinous Floop and Dream Petal Florist, while both strong if used correctly, don't work well together, and other cards like Juicy Psychmelon are absurdly strong in theory, but very clunky and exposed to aggro in practice. Malygos Druid in particular leaves itself painfully exposed to Demonic Project. Still, these decks can work well enough that they'll likely get 2nd and 3rd place for the Druids. At the bottom is Taunt Druid, which has received very few, if any, pieces that can assist it. While Flabidinous can be used to support that deck, that would require getting rid of Oaken Summons. Meanwhile, other decks will be strongly considering Silence and Transform effects, which Taunt Druid likewise cannot handle. Signs point to a dead deck. All that said, I'm not blind. I recognize that Druid has a plethora of strong cards at their disposal, so I'm confident it will be in the top third of classes. Anyways, moving on. Hunter. Hunter has an unusual collection at the moment, with a large variety of archetypes that all seem to be lacking in some regard. All that said, let's consider what won't work: Spell, Odd, and Midrange. Both Spell and Odd decks have failed to receive anything particularly powerful, with, I kid you not, Secret Plan being the best thing either deck has received. Everything else either requires minions or doesn't work well enough with the deck in question. Midrange Hunter is meanwhile very reliant on beasts, which Hunter has received few of, and the few they have gotten don't work well in a midrange style. A Secret Hunter using Subject 9 likewise is lacking a few pieces to make it a fully fledged strategy. Decks that might work include 3 that I can think of: Big Death Rattle, Egg Death Rattle, and Mech Death Rattle. I'm sensing a theme here. Unfortunately, Big Death Rattle requires the deck be built in such a way that it's exposed to aggro, and only provides so much value. Not very likely to succeed. The Egg Death Rattle deck is easy enough to create. Just add Boommaster Flark and a few more Death Rattle cards to synergize with Void Ripper and the eggs, and now you have a glorious 10-mana finisher. Maybe add in a Necromechanic for tech. However, I believe a different avenue of deck will come out of top for this class: the Mech deck. Hunter has some powerful Death Rattle mechs at their disposal, specifically for aggressive purposes, along with decent cards that can work in tandem. I believe such a deck will usurp Zulok's position as the aggro deck of choice, though I could prove mistaken. I can't exactly fault the lack of variety with these Hunter decks. Last expansion, Hunter got dragon pieces, and this expansion, not a single dragon was released. This leaves Hunter only one avenue, exploiting Death Rattle synergies to their fullest. These variants have enough weaknesses and enough strengths such that I'm putting Hunter in the middle ranks. May their mediocrity continue to fumble along. Anyways, on to Mage. Let me be clear, Mage's spell damage package for this expansion sucks! There is sincerely no reason to run minions with bad tempo in order to create minions with good tempo. With that out of the way, let's consider what Mage does have to offer. Minions strong with a large hand size. Once you start with that premise, the deck builds itself. Book of Spectres and Arugal, put in elemental synergies, add Frostlich to help out, and since you got all that, you might as well throw in Luna and her Pocket Galaxy. Such a deck can certainly have destructive results, but this begs the question, don't Big Spell Mage and Evenlock basically do the same thing but better? But unfortunately, that's all I got for Mage deck predictions, since the next best thing Mage has to offer is the Antonidas combo, which makes the deck it's in remarkably weak to murder. Odd Mage and Tempo Mage likewise receive no pieces other than Stargazer Luna, and are likely to get oppressed by better Baku wielders. So clearly I'm not optimistic about Mage's ladder chances. Even Arena doesn't look great for them. Best of luck, Mage. I fear you're gonna need it. Onwards, Paladin. So here's the good news. Odd Paladin got nearly nothing it can use in this set. Here's the bad news. I don't think that's gonna make a difference. However, simply saying that the most prevalent deck from last expansion will continue to be so is rather boring, so I'll propose something different. Secret Paladin. Simply put, this deck would use Bellringer Sentry and Auto Defense Matrix as a moderately powerful combination. Couple that with a few fast-paced mechs and the Christology card draw, and top it off with Prismatic Lens, and we got ourselves something that might actually outpace Odd Paladin when it comes to tempo. I can only hope. Unfortunately, Mech Paladin appears to have a few too many holes in its strategy, and as a result, it doesn't seem likely to come together. The only way I can envision mechs working is to have them as an accessory in other decks, namely Secret and Even. If you try to make an odd mech deck, then you've forgotten what makes Odd Paladin overpowered in the first place. Likewise, Control Paladin received a few beautiful tools, but lacks any method to actually end the game, and as a result will probably fall short. Anyways, between the different fast variants, I'm fairly certain Paladin will remain near the top for this expansion as the crown kings of tempo. Hooray! Moving on, Priest. The archetypes for Priest at the moment appear somewhat lacking. Buff Priest uses combinations that nobody ever considered, and Death Rattle Priest revolves around 3 cards that barely synergize. So what hope does Priest have? Actually, not an unfair amount, thanks to one final detail: Omega cards. Investing in these cards can allow for powerful swings towards the end of the game, either defensively healing or offensively playing for mana 12/6s. That plus cards like Dustbreaker and Psychic Scream will make Priest the go-to when it comes to warding off these other faster decks. Again, this is just looking at the strongest Priest deck from the Witchwood, but can you blame me? All of these Death Rattle cards lack synergy with each other, with the exception of the Buff Priest archetype. And I simply have more confidence in a control deck than a Buff Priest in a meta where silence exists. So when it comes to what won't work, I think I'm going to double down and say that this idea of a Buff Priest won't. Test Subject and Xeric are both dependent on the central pillar of buff cards, and Priest doesn't have enough strong variants of these cards. In fact, the main cards that work with these are kind of idiotic in isolation, so I cannot envision such a deck working out favorably. As for the rankings among the classes, I would love to believe that Priest would be in the middle, but currently they're sitting right at the very bottom, and that's with Control Priest being tier 2. So logic beats emotion. Bottom of the pack, Priest goes. Onwards, Rogue. Blizzard introduced a pair of archetypes that are polar opposites for this class: Death Rattle and Empty Deck Combo. This all comes at a time that Rogue has several other variants, namely Odd, Miracle, and Tempo, with a different Empty Deck combo sitting around somewhere. Basically, Rogue is the main deck that has a lot of different pieces, with none of them working together. I sincerely have no idea what would be the better deck: a mid-range Death Rattle incorporating Myra and Necrium Blade, or an odd Rogue with Unstable Element thrown in to give an endgame Hail Mary option. That second deck sounds hilarious, if somewhat impractical. Anyways, all of this variety means that I can't do much in the way of deduction. So instead, I'm going to do the lazy tactic and give the gold medal to the deck that can fit all 3 of the strongest new cards: Necrium Blade, Myra, and her invention. And the answer is quite simple: Tempo Rogue. I imagine this deck will occupy the place in the meta Tempo Mage once was, using the elements to replace a Lunith and the weapon and other synergies to push damage and control quickly. Perhaps this deck will run Saps and Eviscerates, or perhaps it will run Kelisak. Both appear to be strong options. Now call me bold, but I believe this will be Rogue's moment to emerge as a top tier class. While spread thin once Witchwood came out, I see this as Rogue's opportunity to transform from a master of none to a master of all. Rogue simply has the best pieces and the means to use them. That being said, I don't envision a Cube Rogue or other variants of Combo Death Rattle coming into existence. As great as that plus the Necrium Vial would be, the other pieces don't fall in as smoothly. I don't know if anyone was predicting that particular archetype, but if you were, I'm unpredicting it. Sorry. Next up, Shaman. Shaman's biggest deck for Witchwood received nothing useful, while also having a different class receive a half-decent countercard. Will this stop that deck? No, it will not. At least I don't think so. Shudderwock Shaman is a special breed of control deck that will obliterate slow opposition, so a single countercard won't push that deck out of the meta. However, the remaining potential decks for Shaman are receiving relatively mediocre pieces, particularly Elemental Shaman. These cards aren't bad, but not particularly good either. When it comes to going over the other variants of Shaman, such as Token Shaman, I don't quite see the point. The different decks all have weaknesses that other decks we have covered lack, notably a reliance on combos and an unstable curve. So Shaman joins Priest and Mage at the bottom of my predicted totem pole. This of course leaves Warlock and Warrior in the middle, but how precisely will these decks fare? Let's find out, starting with Warlock. First off, even lock with Demonic Project and Sacrificial Pact. I need to stress, this new card is a powerful tool in many matchups, especially in a deck already containing copious tech cards. This is the best way for the Demonic Project to be incorporated into the meta, and as such, I believe it will come into existence for that reason. At the same time, ignoring Heal Zoolock is likely a mistake. Cards like the Solarium and Crystallizer give that deck some new pieces, meaning that it may not die out particularly easily. Heal Zoolock definitely appears to be an unplanned side effect from the last several expansions. This meta will be an interesting test to see if this symptom is temporary or a permanent tumor. For this class, I won't predict a deck type that won't work. I'll just provide a warning. Hand buffing demons isn't a strong mechanic. We already did this with Paladin in Mean Streets. It wasn't good enough then, and it isn't good enough now. Anyways, onto our final class. Warrior. Let's be real here, Aggro Warrior doesn't exist, which means that all that's left is Boom. Quest Warrior is likely a deck that will be abandoned quickly, since its mech counterpart that utilizes Dr. Boom as much as possible will overshadow it in the early game and match it in the late game. But what do I predict as top tier material? Well, here's my proposal. Odd Mech Warrior. Using control pieces, including mechs, this class will make its way to the endgame where it can use Dr. Boom's abilities alongside the Boom ship to eventually get control of the game. With the exception of Weapons Project, all the best control cards are odd for Warrior this expansion, even in regards to neutral minions. Looking at you, Zilliax! With all this in mind, and with the even mechs generally being more aggressively oriented, this deck looks precisely like the tempo control deck that Dr. Boom fits so perfectly into. When it comes to other decks, I'll be honest, I can't see any other variants of Warrior that warrant a warning. It's all about Boom, and Boom decks build themselves. So long as your Warrior deck includes this card, and you aren't an idiot, you should be just fine. Finally, I'll address some oddball decks that might work. First off, Mechathune would probably work best in Druid, since that deck has a consistent Togwaggle deck in its employ. I don't expect this to work perfectly, at all, but I'm sure people will try it. Second, Glowtron and Amalgam can be used together to potentially revive Murloc Paladin. Hooray, more ways for Paladin to kill us quickly. Third, Innerfire Combo Priest may use Topsy-Turvy in order to counter Skulking Geist. It seems niche in my opinion, but I suppose it can potentially work. And lastly, keep an eye out for a Heal Even Paladin. I feel like there might be something there, but I don't think there will be room in the meta for it. Definitely a little too unusual for me to put in with my other predictions. Anyways, that's all I got. Let me know in the comments if you think one of my predictions is off, or come back here in a couple days once you know one of my predictions was off. I'm looking forward to tackling the Boomsday and all of the explosive antics that are sure to come with it. I hope to see you here again when that time comes.